We're going to convert parabola equations to vertex form. So a parabola equation is just a quadratic equation. So it's going to have an x squared value in it. We're not just going to convert it to vertex form, we're going to convert it to vertex p form. So vertex form is in the form y equals a times x minus h squared plus k, where x and y are your variables, a, h, and k are all replaced with numbers. So to change it into p form, it seems like there's a lot of steps, but actually when we get to solving the problem, it's not quite as confusing. Basically, you want to get the x minus some number squared on one side of the equal sign all by itself. So if it's in this form, we want to move our k number, the k constant, whatever's added on, to the other side by doing the opposite operation of subtracting k from both sides. Then we want to move a to the other side. We can divide both sides by a, which is the same thing as multiplying both sides by 1 over a. Okay, so now we have the x minus h squared all by itself. But in p form, instead of writing your number as 1 over a, it's written as 4 times the p value. Okay, and then the last step is you're going to just swap the two sides because you want your x minus h squared in the front. So on the left side of the equal sign. So that would equal 4p times y minus k. So again, it looks like a lot of steps, but when we start working, it's actually not as complicated. So we're going to convert each quadratic to vertex p form by completing the square. I'm just going to zoom in. I'm going to start with this one. So if you've solved a quadratic by completing the square, usually you don't have y involved. You have your quadratic equal to 0. But in this case, we do have y involved. So we want y and our constant, so the number that's not multiplied by a variable, all on the left side of the equal sign. So to move my constant over there, since it's minus 3, I'm going to add 3 to both sides of the equal sign. Negative 3 plus 3 is 0. So on the left side, I have y plus 3 is equal to x squared plus 2x. All right, to complete the square, you're going to add some value to both sides of the equal sign. What that value is, you take your b term. So b term is the number that's multiplied by x. Not x squared, just x. So in this case, our b term is 2. You always divide your b term by 2 and then square it. Okay, well, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and then we have to square it. 1 squared is 1. So I'm just going to add 1 to both sides of the equal sign. So here I have y plus 3 plus 1 is 4 is equal to x squared plus 2x plus 1. So I've completed the square, meaning now the right side of my equal sign is a perfect square. So I can factor it. So we have y plus 4 is equal to, this factors to square root of x squared is x plus square root of 1 is 1. And it's multiplied by itself, x plus 1. So x plus 1 times x plus 1. So all you have to do is take that x squared, take the square root of it, take the constant added on, take the square root of it, and that will be your factored form. But this is just the same thing as y plus 4 is equal to x plus 1 squared. Okay, so we're very close to the p form. It didn't start out in vertex form. It started out as a quadratic. And so there's a bunch of steps I can skip because currently I'm in this form. All I need to do is swap the two sides. So I need that x plus my number squared on the left. So I'm just going to flip this around, is equal to y plus 4. In this case, y plus 4 isn't multiplied by anything. It's not multiplied by that 4p term. That would be 1. So this is my final answer. Okay, so we're going to try that again. So I want my constant on the left side with y. I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides. 12 minus 12 is 0, so I have y minus 12 equals x squared plus 8x. All right, to figure out what I add to both sides, completing the square, I take that number multiplied by x, which is 8, divide it by 2, and then square it. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 4 squared is 16. So I'm going to add 16 to both sides. All right, so I have y negative 12 plus 16 gives me plus 4 equals, okay, I'm going to factor this. It's a perfect squared, so square root of x squared is x, square root of 16 is 4, so x plus 4 squared. So it's factored. Now I just need to flip the sides to get my x plus my, in this case it'd be my h value squared on the left. So x plus 4 squared is equal to y plus 4. So that one was even simpler because I didn't write out all the steps. I didn't write out x plus 4 times x plus 4. So again, if you don't write out as much, it's not as complex as it looked at the beginning. All right, so here's two more. They're in slightly different forms. So we're just going to try a couple just to make sure any form you see, you'll understand how to do it. All right, so this one, I need to first factor. So multiply. So it's already factored, so I need to remultiply. So x times x is x squared. X times 2 is plus 2x. 4 times x is plus 4x. And 4 times 2 is plus 8. Okay, so I need to combine like terms, and I need to move my constant to the left side with y. So I'm just going to start out, 8's my constant. I'm going to move it to the left side with y, so I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. 8 minus 8 is 0. So here I have y minus 8 is equal to, this side has to be simplified. I have x squared, 2x plus 4x is plus 6x, and that 8 is on the other side. All right, so I'm going to complete the square. I have to take the number multiplied by x, which is 6, divide it by 2, and then square it. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 3 squared equals 9. So that means I'm going to add 9 to both sides of the equal sign. So we have y negative 8 plus 9 is plus 1, positive 1, equals, okay, I'm going to factor this. It's a perfect square now. So square root of x squared is x, plus square root of 9 is 3. Remember, square root, what number times itself equals that number? Well, 3 times 3 is 9. And this is squared because I would have x plus 3 times x plus 3. And again, all I have to do is swap sides. So we have x plus 3 squared is equal to y plus 1. All right, let's do one more. Okay, so this one's in a completely different form where it's equal to 0 on the right. I want to keep my y and my constant on the left side, and I'm going to move everything else to the other side of the equal sign. Okay, so that means I'm going to have to subtract 2x squared and subtract 4x from both sides. 2x squared minus 2x squared is 0. 4x minus 4x is 0. I just did them at the same time so I could get them both moved. So on this side, I can leave it as 18 plus y, but I'm just going to write y plus 18 is equal to, well, I have 0 there, so I'm not going to include that. So I just have negative 2x squared minus 4x. Okay, so this one's a lot different than those other ones that we did. So we have a number that's multiplied by x squared. So your coefficient has to be 1 of your x squared term, meaning x squared has to be multiplied by 1. So I'm going to have to factor out that negative 2. So I have y plus 18 equals, I'm going to factor out the negative 2. Negative 2 divided by negative 2x squared is just x squared. Negative 4x squared divided by negative 2 is positive 2x. So all I did was divide everything by the negative 2 to see what was left over inside my parentheses. Okay, so now I'm going to complete the square. But again, there's one little trick that we have to think about in this one. So completing the square, I'm going to look at my number that's multiplied by x, which is 2. So I'm going to do 2 divided by 2 squared. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 1 squared is 1. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides of the equal sign. But I added 1 inside the parenthesis, and technically that 1 is multiplied by negative 2. So because I added 1 that's multiplied by negative 2 to the right side, the 1 that I added to the left side also has to be multiplied by negative 2. Otherwise, the two sides aren't balanced, because if I distribute this, negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. So it's like I added a negative 2 to this side. So I have to add the same value to the other side. Well, 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. So now the two sides stayed equal. All right, so we have y plus 1 times negative 2 is negative 2, and 18 minus 2 is 16, is equal to, we have negative 2 times, I'm going to factor this because it's now my perfect square. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 1 is 1. And that is squared. Okay, so in this case, I do need to get rid of that negative 2 that's multiplied by my x plus 1 squared. So I'm going to multiply both sides by negative 2. I can divide both sides by negative 2, or I can multiply by 1 over negative 2. So multiplying by 1 over negative 2. So I'm just multiplying this by 1 over negative 2. So I also have to multiply this entire side by 1 over negative 2, which is the same thing as multiplying by negative 1/2. So negative 1/2 times negative 2 is equal to 1. So these cancel each other out because they equal 1. So here I have negative 1/2 times y plus 16 is equal to x plus 1 squared. So the last step I have to do is that we have to swap sides. So we have x plus 1 squared is equal to negative 1/2 times y plus 16. All right, so that one's just a little more complicated, a few more steps to do. So I'm going to have you go ahead and try 3 problems, just like the problems I just did. When you're ready, I'll go through the answers with you. All right, so for this first one, we're going to subtract 9 from both sides, and we get y minus 9 is equal to x squared plus 4x. So to figure out what we add to both sides, you're going to do 4 divided by 2 and then square it. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 2 squared equals 4. So here we're going to add 4 to both sides. So we have y, negative 9 plus 4 is negative 5, is equal to, this side's now a perfect square. Square root of x squared is x, square root of 4 is 2. We have to switch sides. So we have x plus 2 squared is equal to y minus 5. Okay, so then this one we have to distribute, we have to multiply. We have y equals x squared plus 8x plus 12. To move my 12 to the other side by subtracting 12 on both sides. So we get y minus 12 equals x squared plus 8x. All right, to figure out what my b value is, I'm going to take 8 divided by 2 and then square it. Well, 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 4 squared is 16. So I'm going to add 16 to both sides. On the left, we have y plus 4 is equal to, right, factor the right side. We have x, square root of x squared is x, square root of 16 is 4. So we have x plus 4 squared. Switch sides, and it gives us x plus 4 squared is equal to y plus 4. Okay, our last one. All right, this was similar to the last one I did together with you. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 3x squared and 6x from both sides. And I'm going to rewrite 18 plus y to y plus 18 is equal to negative 3x squared minus 6x. So here I have to factor out negative 3. We have y plus 18 equals negative 3 times x squared plus 2x. I'm going to add something on, so I have to figure out what it is that I'm going to add on. But I'm going to add that to both sides. This side's multiplied by negative 3, so whatever I add on, since it's multiplied by negative 3, this side has to be multiplied by negative 3. So I have to figure out what that number is that I'm going to multiply it by. Okay, so take our b value, which is 2, divide it by 2 and square it. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 1 squared is 1. So I'm adding 1 to both sides. Well, negative 3 times 1. Okay, so this simplifies to y plus negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. 18 plus negative 3 is 15. Equals negative 3 times perfect square inside the parentheses. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 1 is positive 1. And that's squared. So I need to move that negative 3 to both sides, so that's the same thing as multiplying both sides by negative 1/3. Negative 1/3 times 3 equals 1, so they cancel out. So we have negative 1/3 times y plus 15 is equal to x plus 1 squared. But we have to flip the two sides. So we have x plus 1 squared is equal to negative 1/3 times y plus 15.